Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey guys, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to the podcast. I'm Allistair McCaw. In this week's episode of What It Takes, I have the USA Rugby Men's 7's head coach, Mike Friday. A little bit of history. I ran into Mike probably 2 years ago in Chula Vista, California, at the Olympic training facility there in just outside San Diego. And the first thing that caught my eye was just the level of professionalism of the rugby team, the guys' rugby team. Now, obviously, United States are not known as a big rugby country. However, what's been incredibly impressive about them is that they've gone to the top of the world rankings just as recently as December 2018. And they're obviously the defending Las Vegas 7 champions as well, which comes up this weekend. So I really wanted to get Mike on the podcast. Mike himself had a great playing career. He played for Harlequins and he also played for Wasps in England. And he's also worked with the England 7's rugby team, the Kenyan 7's rugby team, and was appointed head coach to the USA Men's 7's team in 2014. So a passionate coach, truly inspirational. He's done an incredible job with these guys, and I'm really excited. I'm excited to get him on the podcast today. So enjoy this one, guys. Here's Mike Friday. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Hi there. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. I know especially it's a busy week for you guys because you're heading out to the Las Vegas 7's this weekend to defend your title. We
are, yeah. We've been in camp the last 7 to 10 days, and we fly out tomorrow afternoon. So we've got one more day in Chula Vista, and then we join the madhouse of Vegas Tuesday evening, and then we're kind of into it. You know, Wednesday will be an off day, Thursday will be a captain's run, and then the tournament starts Friday. So it will soon be here.
Yeah, obviously you guys must love it because it is obviously home ground, and obviously looking at the result from last year of taking the title, it must definitely be one of your favorite places.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one in terms of some teams and some players in other teams and countries I've been involved in seem to have a burden when they play at home. Whereas with our boys, it very much it kind of inspires them to rise to the challenge. They don't carry the pressure or don't feel the pressure. They use it as fuel to feed them in the challenge of the actual tournament of playing at home. So, you know, they enjoy it. I think because we get very few opportunities to play in front of our home support, we get very few opportunities for the home support to experience us running out on the pitch, that I think it's kind of almost like a perfect storm. And, you know, of course you don't always win, but in terms of performance, we always do seem, up until now, and let's hope we don't change that this weekend, to rise to the challenge. And part of that is most definitely the boys having the opportunity to play in front of friends and family, and also kind of cherishing those moments when you get to play in front of a passionate, loyal USA Rugby community.
Now you mentioned there in a few seconds ago about some players can perform under pressure, perform in front of their fellow country people, and some can't. Is it something that you prepare them for, Mike, with regards relishing the moment and enjoying the moment playing in front of the home supporters?
I mean, we do spend a lot of work on not only what I would say there's the physical preparation, and then there's the kind of the technical and tactical preparation, which is, you know, knowing your role within the team and knowing, you know, what your job is, and ensuring that physically you've got yourself where you need to be. But we do a lot of work on the mental preparation side as well, in terms of, you know, getting yourself in the right place, and also helping and supporting one another to get each of you into the right place, whatever that may be. And, you know, that's a big part of what we've layered on top of the boys. It's not something we could do at the start. You know, like anything, you have to build the athlete, build the man, and we have to layer on these toolkits to enable them to try and fulfill their potential. And, you know, we work a lot on the communication skills side with the group, and also being very self-aware and aware of each other, so that they're able to support one another, but also recognise those signs within themselves so that they can get themselves back on track. I also think there's an element of instinct involved in this as well, and I think, you know, especially as I touched upon, the American boys seem to enjoy the challenge of playing at home, and cherishing playing in front of their family. And I think part of that is instinctive as well. I think, you know, certain personalities go that way, and other personalities, you know, can feel that burden, and they have to channel it and focus it in a different way. But it's you know, everybody's built differently, and that's not just individually, but also culturally, dependent on what country and what nation you're from, and the expectation of that. But the key thing for me is helping the player and assisting the player to be very self-aware and aware of his teammates, in order that they can help themselves but help each other.
And, you know, Mike, we're going to get definitely into that in this podcast with regards to mindset and also emotional intelligence, which I know you're very big into. For the listeners out there, I met Mike probably 3 years ago at Chula Vista in California, where that's their home base. And, you know, that was during my time of actually writing my first book, and I was observing a lot of coaches, which I do. And definitely, Mike, you were one that impressed me, and the way the relationship you have with your players, and definitely in today's podcast, I'd love to, you know, get into that a little bit more. But let's go back a bit, Mike. Let's go back to where it all started for you in the game of rugby. You obviously played, you know, obviously did a little bit of research on you. You obviously had a professional career as well. Where did it all start for you?
Well, it's bizarre. I mean, obviously, my father played as a you know, as I was growing up, but I actually went to a soccer school.
Okay.
So I played soccer from the ages of 5 through to 16. But I used to go and play rugby on a Sunday morning, in mini rugby, or they would probably call it in America rookie rugby. But back then, when you were 5 years old, it was full contact from the age of 5. And I just got into it that way. And like all things, you know, you aspire to be like your father, and your father's your first mentor, your role model, your hero. And, you know, I followed him everywhere. And he was a okay rugby player, but, you know, he got me into the game, and I played soccer alongside my rugby, and soccer again complemented me in my development as a rugby player, because it made me see space in a different way. And that's, you know, a big thing for me is multi-sports, and how that complements how you can then specialise at the right time, or the appropriate time, once you as a young man has decided what you want to do. So I played locally at the local rugby club, Bromley, and then interestingly enough, back in England, if you were the school systems on the representative level, let's just say they weren't kind of that reliable. So I didn't actually play any representative rugby because I went to the wrong school, and that unfortunately is how it went. But I got picked up by Wasps as an 18-year-old. I got spotted playing, and I got taken to Wasps as an 18-year-old, and that's where I played the majority of my professional rugby career, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Although it was the other side of London, and I had a few years playing for Blackheath in nearer home, and that's there. From there, I just kind of spiraled along, because back when I started playing the game, it was amateur. So I was part of the very first group that went from playing, for want of a word, amateur rugby to professional rugby. And what I mean by that is not a lot really changed, because basically you just had to do all your training around your day job, rather than when you became professional, which meant that you could do it in the day. But I would still say we trained just as much as we were evolving from the amateur to the professional game. Not to the levels now, but obviously science has taken over. But you know, you had a real perspective back then of enjoying the game because you had to work and do a normal job alongside it. So, brought up in a very different time.
Was that transition from amateur to professional? That happened in the mid-90s, right? That happened after the 95 World Cup?
Yeah, 95, 96. Yeah, just after that, so 95, 96. And it evolved over time. So, I mean, when you look back now, you know, and how it evolved, I think they've probably done it differently.
It was Terry Packer, wasn't it? It was the Terry Packer era.
Yeah, it was Packer and Murdoch trying to upset the apple cart, and then ultimately in England the clubs took responsibility rather than union, whereas in the Southern Hemisphere the unions took responsibility. So it was a precarious time, and it was, you know, there was plenty of uncertainty from year to year, but what you had back then was a lot of employers that employed rugby players because not just because they were good rugby players, but also actually the values and the skill sets that you had as a rugby player were quite useful in those professions. But the quid pro quo was they were flexible with your working week, which then allowed you to, you know, as a young man, to do all these great tours and play the game you love. So you thought you had the best of both worlds.
Interesting. You know, there's a lot of similarities. You know, I had Danny Cipriani on the podcast, one of the earlier episodes, and he also, you know, spoke about the importance. He played soccer as well at an early age, and you know, obviously multi-sports being important. Another similarity is that he played for Wasps, and you also played for Wasps, but he definitely said his soccer helped his rugby skills, and especially, you know, being a halfback. I think you were scrum half, and he is obviously
that's right,
fly half. So those skills would definitely develop. Now, I want to go into that, Mike. How important is it, or what age would you say someone should specialize if they want to go into rugby? Is it important to play different sports at a young age?
I would say so. I think you know, like anything, I think you need different experiences in life as a young man and a young lady, and different sporting experiences, not just from kind of enjoying games and understanding games, but also, you know, different team games have different kind of values and cultures attached to them that are unique. So, you know, to experience and have the diversity of experiencing that, I think is important because that gives you perspective. So I would be encouraging all young sports people to be playing as many team sports and individual sports if that takes their interest, from the ages of, you know, as soon as they're 3 or 4 all the way through to the kind of 18, 19. I think by the time you get to 17, 18, you need to be probably focusing on a sport, not necessarily specialising, because it shouldn't abstain you from participating in other sporting activities. You just have to have a focus on where you're going to put all your energies. But you can still, you know, hang out. It's still important that you maintain those social connections with those people that you might have done other sports with. But I probably would say around that kind of 17, 18 years of age, you probably need to be bringing that focus in to try and excel at one particular sport, if that's your choice. And the beauty of that being that if you've learnt many sports in that kind of golden EQ age, as I call it, between the ages of 12 and 17, then if that focus sport doesn't work out for you, then you can come back to it. And I think that's quite pertinent in the USA, especially where, you know, American football and basketball and baseball just, they're the super sports, right? They're always going to be the team super sports. But if you've learned rugby from the ages of 12 to 18 and you chase that D1A American football scholarship or basketball and you get it, but you don't make it to the professionals, then you could still pick up a rugby ball, and it would take a coach like me. I'd back myself as a coach with one of those type of athletes 6-7 months, and then they could be competing. And now they've got another opportunity to maybe be a potential Olympian. I mean, the blueprint's Nate Ebner. Nate Ebner is the classic person that rugby EQ'd in the younger age, chose football, but then set himself the challenge of coming back to try and get into the Olympics. And it took him a 6-month period of adjustment. in order to achieve it, but he did it. But he wouldn't have been able to do it if he hadn't have been playing rugby from the ages of 12 to 18, because the brain is a clever thing and it does store a lot of stuff, and it's just a case of getting it to the front of the brain from the back. And that was an extraordinary athlete to work with, but to see him go through those kind of changes over the 6 months, and took a lot of determination and commitment from him, but was actually a pleasure to be involved with, and amazing to see.
Yeah, interesting you should say that. I was brought up in South Africa, so obviously Southern Hemisphere, and usually your rugby players would also be pretty good cricket players as well. It was just a certain, that a lot of them would be playing first team in high school in both sports, cricket and rugby. Obviously the environment fosters that as well. But it was very interesting that they still played. Sometimes they had to choose their sport leaving school as into where they were going to, go professionally. Now, Mike, you spoke about college there. Is rugby in colleges yet in the United States?
I think it is, and I think that they're club games rather than varsity games.
Okay.
So I think that obviously puts it on a very different level. But I think what we're seeing is we're seeing the emergence of rugby, and I think where the education piece is that as coaches we need to help educate the high school coaches that specialise in football and basketball, where the rugby can complement. Mm-hmm. Doesn't need to compete; it can complement, and I think then the players will actually be fresher and enjoying their other sports. Because sometimes a change is as good as a rest, whether you're a professional sportsman or whether you're just a social sportsman. So it's emerging. It's growing. I think there's a quality CRC championships that happens, and there's the 15 championship amongst the colleges as well. But hey, it's never going to be like college football, and that's fine. That's just how it is. But I think that there's every possibility that the game can grow to sit nicely in the college environment, and if they positioned it right, there could be opportunities, because the football squads are so big, and sometimes they don't actually they recruit these college football players but don't play them for a year or two. Mm-hmm. But if they had that rugby background, you could continue to develop them in different ways to get them ready for them to give their shot in the college football teams. They're just kind of wacky ideas that possibly could be considered, but it's growing. And that's what I'd say to you. I would say that there's a long way to go, and I would probably say as far to say that the key to positioning the game properly in America to complement it is it needs to be established on the high school kind of sporting curriculum, because then you'll just expose all of these great sporting athletes that we have in the country to another wonderful team game that has its those kind of traditional human values that are so important in life, as well as sport. Absolutely,
and that's what Champion Minded is all about. Mike, let's go on to coaching. Now, you've coached the England 7's, you've coached Kenya 7's, and you've been with the United States team since 2014. And while I'm at it, huge congratulations on reaching number one in the world in the rankings. I think it was earlier this year, was it, or end of last year?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, from the start of the season, yeah, we've managed to do that, and as well as I did, the tough bit is staying there, and it doesn't mean anything when you're halfway through the season, but for us to even be anywhere near it, from where we've come to, is just credit to the boys. They've seen the fruits of their labour, but they've got to stay hungry and they've got to stay humble, and they've got to continue to work as hard as they have done today and tomorrow, because it can soon be taken away. But we're pleased with where we're at the moment.
Yeah, I tell you, for me, it's definitely been an inspiration, because obviously, as we know, the United States is not a known rugby country, for example, but to take a sport to the top of the world and be competing with countries that basically breathe the sport, for example, New Zealand and England, South Africa, Australia, for example, is just absolutely phenomenal. And that's why I was so excited to get you on the podcast because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen the guys there in Chula Vista, how focused they are, how much food they would eat in the cafeteria. They just just the whole the food bill must be obviously the biggest thing when you leave a hotel at the end of the week. But no, just phenomenal stuff. And again, congratulations on that. But like you said, it's one thing getting to the top, but it's another thing staying there. So that's the challenge. But coaching, where did coaching all start for you, Mike, and why? Why coaching?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one. I was a player, right? And I had a horrible experience with my and I was captain in England at the time. So I just said, I need to be involved in this. And the problem is I was a chartered surveyor by trade as well. And I was getting to the end of playing and I was like, well, I'm either going to go back to the city or actually this is kind of floated my boat. And when I'd been injured kind of 3 or 4 years earlier, I'd done my basic coaching qualifications and I coached my local team at grassroots to try and learn your trade as a coach technically and tactically. And I enjoyed it, but I never saw it as a career, if I'm honest with you. I always planned to go back into the city. And then I fell into being involved with England as a player coach, continued to learn, but then took over as the England coach. And I always I'm a big people watcher and I enjoy the human interaction and I love making things better and I love helping people maximize their potential, be that in sport or be that in anything. So that kind of lights my fire more than anything else. And then if I buy into something, then I like to become an expert in that. And you never become an expert, but you know what I mean? Find out as much as you can and push the boundaries and be the best version of yourself in that area. And that's what happened with my coaching with England, and we had success. But I actually walked away from coaching in 2006 and went back into property, into chartered surveying again, because I am very much, if I'm in, I'm in, if I'm not, I'm not. And I didn't agree with things that were going on with the RFU at the time. So I had a choice to make. You either need to put up or shut up, and it compromised with my values, and so I had to get out. So I left coaching and went to the city. But it's interesting. From there, I was front of shop, as we would call it, in the investment teams. But they took me out of investment teams. Said, we want you to build the teams from behind. So we want you to run and build teams, but be back of shop, which then meant I had to develop even more my communication skills and my ability, my what you call my interpersonal skills, my HR skills, to try and provide opportunities and support to allow these chartered surveyors, these investment agents, to be the best versions of themselves. And it's interesting. So I was coaching in the business world, building teams, and still enjoying it because it's just a different goal, right? It's not win-lose. It's how much money can we make with this team, and how much profit can we make for that client. And then all of a sudden, but I was missing the game. So I did that for about 6 or 7 years, and I learned a lot of lessons. I learned the good sides of business. I learned the bad side to business. But I also learned that it's not like sport, that you have to have more than passion and motivation to get the most out of professionals in a property company. But there's a lot of stuff that I learned there that was highly transferable back in sport, and I was missing it. So when I got the opportunity to get back into the game, it was an opportunity I couldn't turn down. And I couldn't turn down purely simply because somebody had lit the light and the flame under me saying, you know, you haven't been in it for 6 or 7 years. It's all changed. The game's moved on. And I was like, well, the game's still the game. It's still pass, catch, run, tackle. Unfortunately, rugby is still built on the basics on the pitch, as well as the basics of being a good human and a good man off the pitch. So I've learned all these skills in the business world, and I understand the game of rugby. So actually, what do I need to sharpen? I might need to sharpen up and be open to learning that there's different ways to do things technically and tactically. Well, that's a good thing. But I still want to make the best version of that rugby player, which means I need to mould myself around you as a coach. So that's the bit I enjoy. Mould myself around the team in a profession that I have a lot of passion for. Now, I enjoy property, but I wasn't passionate about property, whereas I'm passionate about sport, I'm passionate about rugby, and I'm passionate about making people better. So, it's like, then it doesn't become a job, it becomes a way of life.
Would you also say?
How I kind of evolved with it.
Would you also say that's kind of your philosophy, Mike, with regards? It's about people, not just the sport. It's about building relationships. It's about being able to adapt.
Yeah.
Being able to tap into what motivates them.
100%. I mean, for me, coaching, it's not about the team. It's not about the team moulding around you. It's about you moulding yourself around the team. You have to mould yourself around the team collectively, but also individually. So you've got to be prepared to be flexible, not only in your outlooks, but also in terms of your communication with that individual to allow them to excel. Now, that can be time consuming. That can be actually energy sapping, because it takes a lot of energy and compromise to do that. But the rewards of it are first class. So I talk about growing the man, not the rugby player. Because if I holistically grow the man and help him become the best version of him, then with that he will become a far better rugby player. Now, if I create all of them to be the best version of themselves or help them, then they'll all be better, which means we'll be a better team because they'll be more flexible, more adaptable to one another. Be prepared to compromise one another, be prepared to support one another, be prepared to be firm with one another, because all I try and do is create boundaries. So it's the way that we work culturally and the way that we work is no different to life, in the fact that there's right and wrong and they sit on the white lines around the pitch. You can bounce around like you want in it as long as you don't compromise the values of the team. Now, like all young men, whether you're a young man or whether you're an old man, every man likes to just put his foot over the line to see if he can get away with something, because that's the nature of the beast. And that spirit, and you want spirit in there as well, and you want these individuals, but that means again you've got to be prepared to compromise and talk with them, accept what they have to say, and be prepared to reason with them to get the best out of them. And that's kind of how I approach things. And it's been interesting because to start with, when I arrived, they wanted black and white. And I said, well, life isn't black and white and sport isn't black and white. The result's black and white, but how we get there isn't. And just because I treat you differently to him, it doesn't mean I like him any more than you or like him any less than you. And it doesn't mean he's getting away with anything, but you are all different people. So I'm going to respect that and give you your individuality, but within the collective constraints of the squad. And that takes time to bed in, especially if players aren't used to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that is how we go about things. And I mean, trust me, we had, the first couple of years there was you butt heads with people, but it's all for good intent, and that's what I say to them. I don't do it because I like to do it. I'll have these conversations because they need to be had, and sometimes we all need to be given a little check, and it's all right for you, player A, to pull me to check as well, because I don't always get it right. So it's creating that. I wouldn't say it's a safe environment. I'm creating an environment where you can be authentic yourself, but also you can feel that you can have the confidence to speak up without recourse. And that's a big part of what we try and have here.
Mike, I mean, you're going into culture there, which is perfect, because that's where we're going to get into now. In your opinion, how long does it take to build a successful team culture?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I mean, you never build a perfect one, do you? I mean, that's the reality. It's always evolving. It's always changing. And so what constitutes good, what constitutes bad? I think you can create boundaries very, very quickly. It's then getting them to self-regulate those boundaries and providing them the support to allow them to self-govern. And I would probably say that if you were starting from scratch, it's certainly a 3 or 4 year process, and you're going to have to persevere, because at any one time somebody's going to fall off the horse, which can have a domino effect if it's allowed to. And there'll be a lot of false starts, a lot of, well, this isn't working, and that's not fair. You know, all of the things that you associate with, almost like as a child grows into a man. It's that type of process. And I think culturally, you've also got to be prepared to realise it's a living, breathing thing, which means what worked last year might not necessarily work to the letter this year. So you're not trying to change things, and we talk a lot about this here. We're not trying to change things. We just have to evolve, and that means you have to be open to that evolution, not just as players but as coaches, because you know, coaching wise, well, this has always worked. So yeah, but it works then. It might not work now, and as long as it doesn't compromise the values and the non-negotiables, then hey, let's live and breathe and work with it, and that's kind of our outlook. And I don't think you ever get there, but you know, probably in other people's eyes they'll say, well, if you win that gold medal or you win that World Series, then you did get there. Well, did you? I'm pretty sure there's some teams that have won gold medals and World Series that probably culturally weren't perfect.
Yep, exactly. Now, I always say, especially in my new book, Becoming a Great Team Player, is that a successful team culture is not a winning season. A successful team culture is something that's sustainable over a longer period of time. And, you know, if we look at Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, we look at Greg Popovich at San Antonio Spurs, we now look at Bill Belichick, that's making a legacy at New England Patriots. To me, that's what you know, a successful culture is years and years of you know, sustaining those standards and values. Now, you mention a lot values and standards because I know you're a coach that really drives those. When a new player comes into the US team, do you go through those standards and values with that player, or do you have a culture meeting at the beginning of the year to go through the standards with the players?
We set the standards and we review them every year and we tweak them. But you know, but I think some of these are also they're soft standards. You know what I mean? A lot of it is how you deal with one another, how you communicate with one another, how you treat one another, and you know, those types of things we don't have a meeting on. But we are trying to. You're trying to create the environment through our leadership group that just oozes out through the locker room. That it's dealt with in that undercurrent, because this is just the way it's done here. This is what we do here. This is what's expected, and it's very hard for a young man to come in and, you know, because he's worried about getting it wrong. So the long and the short of it, that's just on the pitch as well as off the pitch, which means that they're not authentic, they're not themselves to start with. So, you know, if they're just bombarded with how it is, then they are going to mess up sooner rather than later. And we have a big thing here. It's okay to get it wrong, because you've got to get it wrong to get it right. So it's just, what we can't have is you constantly getting it wrong and wrong for the wrong reasons. And it's that differentiation. But we deal with this I would say, in a very soft way. It's not a dictatorial, this is it, bang. It's done through a mixture of avenues. You know, there's the written documents that talk about our KPIs and the standards and the haves and have-nots. There's you know, how we'll act. But then there's a lot of the soft and the smaller conversations that will go on the locker room, you know, where the younger guys will probably feel a bit more at ease just asking in their own way at the right time. If somebody's way off, then of course we'll bring them into line, but we're not look to do that in a dictatorial or aggressive way. That might be done in a very softly way with an arm around the shoulder from one of the other players rather than from the coach. Likewise, it might be done the other way. We will bespoke on the individual, and we'll try and understand the person first to then work out the best way to get our messages across.
Excellent. Tell me, Mike, what do you look for in a player when you scout a player? What are the traits? You speak about the person, the human being an important factor, not just the player. But what are some of the traits you look for in a great player, a great team player?
Yeah, I mean, for us, because as you know, scouting over here is a tough job, especially with the limited resources in the size of the country we have.
Yeah.
So I think from the rugby DNA side, first and foremost, we're looking at whether or not their basics are good and whether they have an X factor. So what I mean by that is to be successful in the game of sevens, you need to be good at the basics, but you need to be excellent at one thing. You could be world-class physically, fitness-wise. You could be world-class aerially. You could be world-class with speed. You could have world-class footwork. You could be a world-class passer of the ball or a world-class kicker of a ball, and that sets you apart from the norm. And you've got to be good at other things. But you haven't got to excel. So we look for an X factor, and then we see whether or not we can get all the other bits up to the standards. And that's how we'll assess things. And then we'll start. And then as we get to know the person, which means that's why we have to invest time in them in terms of coming into camps, which is obviously an important stage. Then we can work out whether they are worth bringing into the residency group or not, or whether we have to keep them on the periphery and keep bringing them in for drip feeds. If they're the wrong person, we'll have worked that out probably in 3 months. But we would have gone through this process of vetting. Vetting is a very clinical word. I don't mean that, but of getting to know the guy to understand whether or not he's the right type of person to be successful in our group.
Now, obviously, there's the country sevens of the competition. Obviously, like we're going to see this weekend in Las Vegas. But is there actual professional clubs sevens, or do most of your players come from the 15s?
No, there isn't a bit. I mean, there's the college nationals, which is a ground, a talent ID ground we look in, which is obviously linked to the colleges. There's the club nationals, which are linked to the 15 clubs that all run sevens sides as well, because of the way that the game sits in the US. And that's where we'll talent pool from, because a lot of our boys have played 15s and do play 15s. But ultimately, when we get to the World Series, which is all the year round, you have to specialise now. Is that if I'm going to try and play on the World Series, then I need to try and push myself into the 7's residency program or operate remotely whilst I'm at college. Or now with the start of the MLR, we'll start to see players go to the 15s, but that may cannibalise what we're doing in the 7s. It may not. That's still to be seen, because what we don't want to happen is to lose these potential 7s athletes because they're playing 15s, and that's a different energy system. Although it's the same game and the same skill sets, it's a different energy system, and physically we need them in a different state. So it's a bit of a period of transition, if I'm honest with you, Allistair. So I think over the next 2 or 3 years, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because obviously the pinnacle in the American landscape, sporting landscape for super sports outside of the NFL, basketball, etc., is to be an Olympian. And the only way you can achieve that is in the 7's game.
Of course, it's an Olympic game,
yeah. The 15s is the traditional big brother, but not in America. So there's a few dynamics there that are going to have to play out over the next couple of years, and it's why the USA as a union need to get a very clear strategy about how the MLR clubs will work with the union and vice versa, to ensure that we still can make sure the best players play the USA Sevens and work towards the Olympics, which might be a slightly different athlete pool to those that play in the US 15 Eagles, but there will always be some that cross over and do both.
Talking about the physical side there, obviously 7's is a way more explosive game than the 15s. I mean, To be honest with you, I'm watching more 7's now than I'm watching 15's because of just the explosiveness, the one error and you can lose the match. I mean, obviously the time is shorter as well. But from a physical side, what would the difference be in preparation of a 7's player to a 15's player? Now, I know obviously you've got different positions on the field, but is there more speed work involved in 7's, more track work than the actual gym room?
Well, the reality is we don't. Our boys are powerful and strong, but they're not particularly heavy. So, you know, the thing about rugby is a lot of these boys now are 100, 120 kgs. You know, they're big lads, whereas most of our boys will be between 80 and 95. So, in terms of physically how you're put together, we will strip them of a little bit more weight because we need them to be far more agile, and their ability to do repeated speed and high intensity repeated speeds is over a short period of time is significantly so. It's a completely different energy system. So that physical preparation, you know, going from playing 7's to 15's is a very easy crossover because you're going to be far fitter. The hardest thing will be, can you deal with the week-on-week physical collisions because you're going to be lighter and you're not going to be carrying as much padding, for want of a word, you know. Whereas coming from the 15th to the 7th is probably a 6 to 8 week conditioning adjustment, as you're going to have to shed a load of weight, you're going to have to shed some body fat, and you're going to have to improve your speed endurance beyond anything you've ever have to do when you play 15s.
Yeah.
So those are the trials and tribulations of a player that wants to do both.
Now it was interesting, obviously being out there at Chula Vista at the training grounds, watching the guys train and watching Perry Baker and all these speed merchants out in the track. I mean, it was just, I mean, the speed is phenomenal of those guys. I mean, it's just incredible. And then when they get on the field, obviously you got to have the ball handling skills as well, which we can easily forget from being a spectator point of view, is that you got to have great ball skills as well, not just be able to run fast.
Agreed. Yeah, you do. I mean, you know, Perry and Carlin are insanely quick. I mean, Carlin is insanely quick. But interestingly, you know, both Perry and Carlin are under 80 kgs by a few kgs. There is not a Premiership or a professional top-class winger that is anywhere near that light.
Yeah.
And, you know, which means that they would have to be used to getting smashed by blokes at 120 kgs. And attritionally, they just wouldn't survive. And that doesn't matter how good a rugby player you are. Yeah. You just attritionally wouldn't survive. So it's horses for courses. And that's just the nature of the beast. You know, there are players like Danny Barrett, obviously, who could go between the two. And so there is that crossover as well. You know, it's just it's the beauty of the game of rugby.
Let me ask you a question, interesting one, and actually going back to the 90s, I was actually at Ellis Park when Jonah Lomu, was introduced to the world as so, and that's obviously the famous semi-final against England, running over Mike Catt, of course, and then they played Ireland and Wales in the group stages, and this guy was just a bulldozer. But would Jonah have been a great 7's player?
He was a great 7's player. I had the pleasure of playing against Jonah. I showed him the outside both times, and he took it. But Jonah wouldn't have played on the wing. Jonah would have played in the forward, so he would have played the Danny Barrett role.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, people forget how fast Jonah was. Yeah. I mean, Jonah was, you know, he was an 11-second man, 100 boy. I mean, he was quick for a bit. I mean, for the size of him, and he was actually very agile on his feet. Mm-hmm. I think the thing about Jonah was where he might have struggled a little bit more in the modern day of game of 7's is he wouldn't have had the time to recover. So, you know, Jonah might have been a 7-minute man in the modern day of 7's.
Okay.
But, you know that when Jonah's on the ball, it's happening. Something will happen, and he will either score or he will take 3 defenders, which means that somebody else has got space to score. that was the thing about Jonah when he played in 2001 in that World Cup Sevens when New Zealand won it. He played in 1998 the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur when they won it. Is that and you talk about players that were able to rise to the occasion. I mean, when the big game came, Jonah came to the forefront and he came up with big plays, even when, with the body and the size he had, he physically was probably hurting.
Yeah, phenomenal. Actually, I apologize. I didn't even know he actually played sevens. I thought he was only in the 15s, but well, there you go. There's my answer. So, but what a phenomenal guy as well, right?
Yeah, amazing. And again, it's typical. It's no surprise that these great rugby athletes that we talk about, 9 times out of 10, mate, they were just good men as well. And that, I think, is a big thing in the game of rugby, and a big thing in sport. If you're a good man, more often than not, that you will be the best version of yourself as a sportsman.
Yeah. I mean, I remember growing up, my father obviously being a big rugby man as well, and his hero was Willie John McBride, because obviously from Northern Ireland. So my dad always used to talk about Willie John McBride, and I actually got to meet him. It was when the Barbarians were out at Ellis Park, and it was the days of Serge Blanco, and Willie John was there as well. I think he was the manager of the team. But those are my first memories, and I must have been probably 7, 8 years old. And the size of, all I can remember is the size of Willie John McBride's hands. I think they were the size of a laptop.
Double.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Now, Mike, this has been fantastic. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time because I know you guys are in preparation for the weekend. But a few last questions. They're quick fire questions. It's either one word or a sentence. So I'm going to pull those up now. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. Favorite city you have visited?
Cape Town.
Ooh, okay, nice. Favorite food?
Wow. A roast beef dinner.
Okay. In your opinion, best rugby player of all time? 15s.
15s, best rugby. I will say Gareth Edwards, the Welsh 9.
Yep. One thing that you could change in rugby? We can go sevens or 15 on that one.
That's a toughie. That one thing I'd change in rugby. Do you know what? I'm not sure. I'm trying. I don't think I would change anything about it. I would. I tell you what, I would change the number of substitutions back to 3.
Because at the moment, how many is it?
I think 7 or 8. Only because nobody gets tired anymore, and I think there needs to be more space on the pitch. So I think if there was less substitutions to choose from, then people would get tired, which then means as the game moves on, there would be more spaces.
Okay.
That's a 15.
15s, yeah. Okay. Favorite other sport to watch besides rugby?
Do you know what? I love watching American football now. I don't profess to really understand it, but I do enjoy watching it.
Okay, interesting. I'll be honest with you here, Mike. I still can't get into it, and I've tried. I've been in the United States for 10 years, and I don't know. Just growing up with rugby, I can watch football, but I just can't get into it like I can, with rugby. But I'm sure you look at it from
what was the?
Sorry,
exactly.
go ahead.
What got me into it is I went and spent a few days with the Patriots.
Oh, nice.
And just on the inside, with Ebner sorted me out, let me come and watch them operate. So I started to appreciate the technical and the tactical stuff that they do. I don't understand all the plays, but that then interests me because then I start watching. and I watch the individual players, and that's why it intrigues me.
Yeah, I would have thought that because looking at from those angles of what can you learn and what can you learn from other sports and so on. So yeah, I totally get that one. Favorite athlete of all time?
Favorite athlete of all time, probably Daley Thompson. I don't know if I remember him. Daley Thompson,
of course, yeah, the decathlete.
The English decathlete who was insanely confident to the point where some people thought he was cocky. But I always remember his thing. He had this T-shirt which had TBD, TCB, taking care of business. Daley taking care of business. He backed it up. He did back it up.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I remember him growing up. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay, yeah. I thought maybe throwing that one in because you're British might be tea. So. Well,
you know what? If you'd have asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have said definitely a cup of Builder's tea. But the problem is I've gone all posh now, and I do like. The problem is coffee keeps me going.
Yeah. I'm the same.
It's not that dodgy filter coffee though. It's the posh espresso stuff that the shop. That's what I think.
Oh, there we go. There we go. It can get expensive as well if you're stopping for Starbucks 2-3 times a day, like I was at one stage. So
I know,
yeah.
Nightmare.
But you know what's funny? When I'm actually when I'm here in the United States, I drink coffee. But when I'm in the UK and Europe, I'm drinking tea. I don't know why, but it just just changes over. So anyway, super stuff, Mike.
I'll drink more tea. I'll drink more tea at home in the UK as well. I'm with you. We're a couple of weirdos together.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Last question, Mike. In your opinion, what does it take to be champion-minded?
I think you have to be very self-aware, motivated, focused, have humility, and be prepared to work harder than the man or woman you're trying to compete against.
I like that. Perfect way to end the podcast. Mike, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for obviously taking time out of your busy schedule. Good luck this weekend in Las Vegas. I will see you there. It's on my bucket list. It has been on my bucket list to get out to watch Vegas 7's for the last 5-6 years. I can't wait.
Brilliant. Can't wait to see you, mate.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers.
So there you have it, guys. Another episode in the bag. I hope you enjoyed that one. Remember that this podcast is available on iTunes and on YouTube. Stay connected on social media at Twitter at Allistair McCall, Instagram Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook Allistair McCall page. So, as always, remember you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Until next time, stay champion minded, guys.